So we've got Pete here, and I thought what it would be good is just to find out and hear the story of somebody who has built their life on Jesus and his words. So, Pete, do you want to tell us how that all began for you?
Yeah, okay. So I grew up in a family, I guess, that took me to church and took me to Sunday school and things like that. So I guess I was familiar with Bible stories from quite a young age. And actually, I remember a lot about the Bible from those days as well. I remember thinking on it quite a lot when I was going to bed and stuff. So as I got into teenage years and things, I was starting to have a few doubts, really. I think people were starting to question me a little bit on it, and I just didn't know, really. So by the time I arrived at university, I guess I was I was still a Christian, but I think I was a Christian that had doubts that I wanted resolving. And so I took opportunities to try and resolve those. So I'm a science teacher by trade, and I studied chemistry at university. And I think it's been hard drilled into me, really, that that conclusions are based on evidence, And I think I realised at that point that really I didn't have good reasons for my faith, and I didn't like that. So I ended up trying to think, well, what kind of evidence could I, can I find for God and things? So, and chemistry, isn't too helpful. You can't put God in a test tube, can you? But I guess there is there is an element where I understand the importance of evidence, and there's more than one type of evidence. The scientific evidence is not the only evidence there is. And I think when I got to university, people were pointing out to me, well, there is actually historical evidence in the Bible that you can look at. And I remember reading Luke's Gospel, and that book starts with, it's written by a historian, effectively, a doctor historian, and he was saying, many people have tried to draw up an account of the things that Jesus said, the things that he did, that they were told by the eyewitnesses from the beginning of things. But I've also researched this from the beginning, and I thought it'd be good to write an orderly account for this guy, Theophilus, called Most Excellent Theophilus. But I thought it was... But that was a helpful start to a book for me, because it made it clear, look, he's claiming that this is history, and he's claiming that these things really happened, and it's therefore historical evidence, and I found that very helpful. So as I read it and read about the things that Jesus said, the things that he did, things that I don't think any person can do, things like controlling the weather, or healing people, or on more than one occasion raising a dead person, and he was a very clever guy, wasn't he, Jesus? Very clever guy. People were on him because he was making not so subtle claims to be God, and that's blasphemy. And in that kind of culture, they kill you for that. And they were trying to catch him out, and he just wasn't being caught out at all. There's a story where it's about a guy comes up to him and says, "Should we pay taxes to Caesar?" And that's a real problem, because if he says yes, a lot of the Jews that he's got a following with will not want to go with that. But if he says no, he's got the authorities on his back, and he says, whose image is on the coin? And he says, and they say it's Caesar's, and Jesus replies, well, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, and give to God what's God's. And that's huge for me. That is a very, very clever response, because and I remember reading in Genesis about how we're made in the image of God. Give to God what's God's. And I think these kind of things made a tremendous impact on me as I was reading them, and I came to realize actually there is a lot of historical evidence to back this, and I feel very comfortable now. I think I have a lot of assurance that Jesus is who he said he is.
Just on that, Pete, let me say, because I remember, which you can watch online, I did a longer talk another time about It's about an hour though, so you have to really commit. But it's about the Bible and everything for the Bible. But one of the things I said in that, or whether it was in the questions afterwards, that I said, I remember once walking down Newland Avenue, and I said to the children, "Oh, we should go to that bakery." And they said, "Which bakery?" And I said, "The bakery that's doing the bread." And they said, "How do you know there's a bakery?" I said, "Well, I can smell it. It's in the air. There's an aroma." And my children said, "Well, you don't know where, you can't see it. You don't know that someone's baking." But I said, "But you do." And then we got to the bakery and ate some bread. And what I've discovered with the Bible, the more and more I've read it, and stories like the account you just said, is that the Bible has the aroma of God. Even before you start, well, as you start digging in to it, and you start reading it, you just realize that this is not just man-made stuff.
Yeah.
It has God's print on it, God's smell, so to speak.
Yeah.
Just like you can establish that there's a bakery.
That's very much my experience, you know. So I think about, you know, it amazes me really when the Bible is obviously written over many thousands of years. It's, well, many thousands of years. Yeah. It's, you know, many different authors, and yet has a consistent theme all the way through. You know, it's completely consistent on what it teaches about, you know, what human beings are like, for example. And it's got a completely consistent theme about how, you know, we by nature want to rule things ourselves. You know, we decide actually we think we'll be happier if we call the shots ourselves, you know, and that resonates deeply with me. I think that is my default go-to behavior. I always think, right, you know, this is how I do it. And the Bible's message from front to back is just how God is chasing after people that have rebelled against him, that have clearly offended him in a big way, because he's the creator and the one who calls us to, you know, to live in his world in the way he says. And the fact that we can offend him in such a way, make such a mess of the world, and yet he still chases after us and wants us to be in relationship with him. And that is a big theme all the way through. And I think, you know, I just find it amazing that you see that thread all the way through a book like the Bible. And, you know, and when it comes to its climax in the New Testament, where you hear of Jesus being God, comes to die on a cross to take the punishment, that relationship can be restored. I mean, I feel valued. You know, I feel loved beyond anything that, you know, it's just, I find that overwhelming. Yeah.
There's, I was listening to an interview this week by a guy, Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know him, but he's taking the world by storm, really. He's was a lecturer in Canada. Not a Christian, or at least not yet, maybe on the way. But he was talking about the rise to popularity and the things that he's saying and why it's gripping a whole swathe of people and why young people are flocking to him. And he at least had the humility to say, "I'm not saying anything that isn't found in the Bible." And it's really interesting in his mind, and I don't think yet he's a committed Christian, but he's basically saying, "I'm only putting those old truths out there." So there's a big chapter in one of his books where he basically says, "Children, tidy your bedroom. You won't get anywhere in life if you can't tidy your bedroom." And his idea is, you start by governing the little area that's been given to you, and then you learn how to give more. And he says, but that's exactly what's in Genesis, where God says to Adam and Eve, govern the little part that's being given to you. And it's just this interesting thing that actually the world doesn't want the Bible and Jesus' teaching. And yet as soon as someone who's not claiming to believe in God or anything comes, but says things that are in the Bible, people are drawn to it. They kind of want that, but don't necessarily want God for themselves. For you now, married, children, your life, what does the Bible mean to you then? How is it shaped, and how does it shape your life, Jesus' words?
Yeah. I would say we try very hard. My wife and I try very hard to put the Bible as the kind of governing force of our life. So we would use it to try and. I think there's something about Jesus that I wouldn't say this isn't something that we necessarily feel a burden. You know, when I read about Jesus in the scriptures, I think he's an incredible person. He's a very likable person, Jesus. I think an incredibly challenging person. I read about Jesus and think, well, I wish I was like that. But I'm really not. So I think just how very selfless he was, just how very compassionate he was with weak people that were really struggling. He wasn't going to knock them down to promote himself and stuff like that. And you don't see that really very often. And I think I want to be like that. And I think it's, therefore, when we're reading about God's ways and things, sometimes people say, like, 10 Commandments, they are restrictive, and you talk about this. But I think, actually, imagine if the whole world followed those things, and there was no stealing, and, it would be a really nice place to be. Now, that's not to say that I can do it very well, and I understand that, as the Bible would call us sinful people. By default, we mess up all the time, daily, and that is very much my experience, and I expect it will be till I die. But I think there's something about reading the scriptures that I want to do those things, and in my clearer moments, I just love Jesus in my clearer moments, and I think so when we're trying to make decisions about how we spend our money, how we spend our time, where we live, all of these kind of things, I think we are trying to do that through the lens of what would please God. We want to do that. And I think because I just can't imagine how else God could have expressed his love to us any more clearly than sacrificing to that extent for us. So we, as a family, we want to do that. And I think, we're torn in our motives a lot of the time, but I think we at least try to.
I think what you said, that I found there's something wonderfully attractive about Jesus. I think you were hinted at this, where I remember first time being really struck when he says of Jesus, he says a bruised reed. So the idea of a reed that's slightly broken, a weak at point, and he says a bruised reed he doesn't break. And then it says like a smouldering wick, a flickering candle, he doesn't snuff it out. And the idea that he's so compassionate and so tender towards people. And then I looked at myself and I thought, I'm quick to break people with words or snuff them out with something that I said. And that really, I remember the moment in my life where it wasn't so much a command, I need to be like this now, but just being so attracted to how Jesus would treat people. And I just thought, I want to be that. I want to be like him, who doesn't do those kind of things. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add that you'd got that you wanted to say?
I don't know. I'm very tired. I'm not really thinking that clearly.
It's great. It's great. But was there anything else that you wanted to say? And if not, we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say, I think I've never regretted reading the Bible, following Jesus. I've never really felt a day when actually any sacrifice I've been called to make would outweigh the promises that are in the scriptures, And I think I'm genuinely excited, again, in my clearer moments, not in the day-to-day mundane when I forget, but in my clearer moments, I'm genuinely excited about the prospect of heaven, and I'm genuinely fearful of the prospect of hell. And obviously Jesus speaks very, very plainly, doesn't he, about these things, more so than anyone else in the Bible that I can see. And I think, I've come to be very confident that Jesus is for real. And I think it's something that it saddens me that we have so much access to the scriptures today, the Bible, and I'll read things and I'll still be confused by things I read, but actually a lot of it is so clear. And there are people around that can explain it so clearly, and yet many people in our society today just aren't bothered. And that bothers me a lot. But I'm so thankful on the flip side that, for churches like ours where the Bible's just taught clearly and I can understand it, So I think, I've grown to love the Bible. And, And really, I think I grew to love it more when I started just reading it for myself in big chunks.
Yeah.
That's
That's brilliant. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Pete. I sure appreciate it. But thank you for sharing part of your story.